Hey there guys, welcome to the video. My name is Pushpinder Gill, and in this video we're going to be talking about conic sections, right? So this is actually an introductory video on conic sections. So this is an introduction to conic section where we'll be defining a lot of things that will prove helpful in our future videos, where we define some very important aspects. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to cut to the chase here. I'm going to start with a cone. I'm going to start with the definition of a cone. So how do you define a cone actually? Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start with a line. Let's suppose we have this axis here. Let's suppose this axis, or let's say this line, it's line L, and it's kind of a fixed line. Okay, so it's kind of something like this. It's kind of a fixed line, and then we have another line which can rotate, and let's say this is the line which can rotate, and let's suppose this is line M, and this is the line which is a flexible line, right? And let's suppose that the angle between both these lines is alpha, and if I kind of rotate it in such a way such that alpha remains constant. So if I rotate in such a way such that the alpha remains constant, then this is the result that I'm going to get. This is going to be line L, and there are going to be two different types of lines. So the first line M, it's going to be this, which is going to have the angle alpha here, and the second line, it's going to be this, which is again going to have alpha here. And if I kind of rotate it like this, I'm gonna have a kind of something like this. Okay, so just bear with me here. In the top also, I'm gonna have something like this. So if three-dimensionally, if I rotate it something like this, then, and such that the angle alpha remains constant. So this is what it's going to produce, and this over here is nothing but a cone, right? So this over here is a cone in which this line L is actually known as the axis on which we have rotated the line. It's called the axis. This line M is known as the generator, something that has generated the cone. And then you have you have this vertex is actually divided into two parts, which is called nap. It's written like this, N-A-P-P-E. And this part over here, if I kind of divide this into two parts, the upper part here, it's actually known as, the upper part here is known as the upper nap, and the lower part is actually known as the lower nap. So these are the different, these are the various, sections of a cone, and the whole figure, the whole figure is actually called as cone, right? So this is something which we call as cone. And the intersection of a plane, so the intersection of a plane, so when I say plane, I mean to say, intersection of a particular plane, something like this. It's going to be like this. An intersection of a plane with the cone is known as the conic section. So let's suppose if I cut the cone into some part, if let's suppose I have a knife and I cut the cone into different parts. Let's suppose I just make one cut, and the top section of the cone, it's going to be the conic section, right? So let's suppose I have this as my cone, and I bring my knife, I cut it like this, right? So this section at the top, which is going to come, this is going to be known as the conic section. Now there are different types and different kinds of conic sections. There are different types of conic sections. Let's understand those conic sections. They're very, very important. Now the first conic section, now everything depends on, so I'm just going to talk about the first conic section here. Everything depends on the angle between the conic section, the cut, and the axis and the generator. Everything depends on the angles. So let me just draw a cone like this. Let's suppose this over here is the cone. So let's say this is a cone, and we have this as our vertical axis, and this angle here is known as alpha, right? Something that we already know. And let's suppose we have a kind of a plane, or let's suppose I draw a cut. Let's suppose this is the cut that I draw, right? I just make a cut like this. Usually the plane would actually be shown like this, but I'm just explaining to you in terms of cut. So let's suppose we make a cut like this. Then the angle made by the cut and the vertical axis. So the angle made by the cut and the vertical axis is going to be known as beta. So alpha is the angle between the vertical axis and the vertical axis and the generator, and beta is the angle between the plane and the vertical axis, right? So this is angle beta. Now if this angle beta is actually equal to 90 degrees, so let's suppose I make a very sharp cut and the angle here is 90 degrees. So what is the section that you're going to get, right? So what is the section that you're going to get? So you're going to get something like this, and this is what you're going to get, right, at the top. Now what is the property of cutting it at 90 degrees? Now you know that when you cut at 90 degrees here, if you kind of imagine the distance from here till here is going to be equal to the distance from here till here, it's going to be equal to the distance from here till here, it's going to be equal to the distance from here till here and here till here, and pretty much from all the points. Which means because you've actually made a perfect cut, you've made a cut right at 90 degrees, which means when you cut at 90 degrees, you're going to get a circle. What are you going to get? You're going to get a circle when you cut at 90 degrees. So suppose you're getting this point here. Let's get another thing. Let's get the next thing. And the next thing, I'm just gonna again draw the cone again. So let's suppose this is the cone, and just a sec. And we have our vertical axis going out like this, right? And now let's understand the second thing wherein, and this is something which is angle alpha. Let's suppose if we say that we make a beta angle, we don't cut it at 90 degrees, we cut it less than 90 degrees. So we cut it less than 90 degrees. Now in this also there are two different aspects. So the first aspect is when we cut less than 90 degrees and when we cut greater than alpha. So when we make a bigger cut than alpha, then what is going to happen, right? So let me just explain it to you in this way. Let's say this is exactly 90 degrees. So let's say this is exactly 90 degrees, and angle alpha is some sort of angle, and let's say that this is going to be the angle when I make cut at angle alpha. So let's suppose this is going to be angle alpha, which means, now the question says that my angle is supposed to be greater than alpha. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not alpha. Let's say, this is angle alpha, because the alpha is something like this, right? So let's suppose this is angle alpha. Now for me to make a bigger cut than alpha, my cut over here has to be greater than angle alpha, which means my cut has to be definitely greater than this angle, which means my cut is going to be something like this. So this is going to be my cut. My cut is going to be more close to this 90 degree line. So when this is there, when my cut is more close to the 90 degree line, that means when I make that cut, in this is the center point. How is the top section going to look like? Now remember, keep this in mind, that my cut is going to be more close to 90 degrees. Which means if my cut is more close to 90 degrees, and that means when I make a cut, I will be able to make a cut on this line, I'll be able to make a cut on this line. That's for sure, because my angle beta is supposed to be greater than alpha, right? So I'll be able to make a cut on this line, I'll be able to make a cut on this line. Now if I'm able to do that, and let's suppose this is the point over here, and if I'm able to make the cut, then this is how the section is going to look like. This is how it's going to look like. If I show you right here, let's suppose this is our the upper nap of a conic section, and if I make a cut like this, then if I make a cut like this, then the section is going to look like this. Now in this case, if let's suppose this is the center point, the distance from here till here is not equal to the distance from here till here, because this is going to look something like this. It's not going to be an exact circle, but it's going to look something like this, kind of an oval shape, and we call this shape as an ellipse. Pretty important shape, right? So we're going to be discussing more about this, but right now we're just understanding what all different shapes that you can get. So if beta is less than 90 degrees and beta is greater than alpha, then we get an ellipse. And the next thing over here is when I make a cut. Let's suppose again I draw kind of a cone. Now let's suppose over here I make a cut of alpha is equal to beta, right? So if I make a cut of alpha is equal to beta, now remember in the previous case, beta was supposed to be greater than alpha, which means it was more close to the line which is cutting the vertical axis. So let's suppose this is the vertical axis. The line cutting the vertical axis is 90 degrees. Now over here I'll be making a much steeper cut, a cut like this. So over here I'll be making something of a cut like this. So I'll be kind of skipping this line completely. Now in that case, the kind of cut, the kind of section that I'm going to get, it's going to be, which is going to be something of this sort, right? So this is what I'm going to get, and that is what I'm going to get, which is going to be a parabola. So that is something which is called as parabola. We're going to be discussing more about parabola and all these things in the future videos. Right now, you should know that when I make a cut where alpha is equal to beta, so this is alpha, and this is something which is beta here. Beta is the angle between the cut and the vertical line. So you can clearly see that this is something which is a parabola. And the fourth kind of cut is when I make, now we have already done the case where angle beta was actually greater than angle alpha. Now if we make a cut where angle beta is actually less than angle alpha, but making sure that they're both positive or equal to 0, they're not negative angles. Now in that case, let's suppose if I make a cut like this. Now in this case, beta is actually going to be a pretty small angle, which means I'm going to make a cut of something like this. So if I make a cut of something like this, in that case I'll be missing the left side altogether, and I'll actually get two different cuts. I'll actually make a cut on the bottom side as well. So I'll get something like this, and I'll get something like this. So this cut, or the section that I'm going to get, is known as hyperbola, right? So I suppose you're understanding what we're trying to do here. I'll just summarize what I just said here, that if you have a cone, let's suppose this is the cone. Now understand, this is an introductory video on conic sections. We're going to be discussing all these figures in detail in the future videos. Let's suppose this is the cone, and this over here is line L, which is known as the axis, and this line M is known as the generator, and this is the angle between them, and this is the angle that I make with the cut. Now if the angle beta is actually equal to 90 degrees, then we get a circle. If the angle beta is less than 90 degrees but it's greater than alpha, then we actually get an ellipse, and which is something like this. This is something like this. And if this angle beta is actually equal to alpha, then we get something which is called as a parabola, which looks something like this. And if this angle beta is actually less than alpha, which is greater than or equal to 0, then we get a hyperbola, which looks something like this, right? So this would be about this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching this. In the next video, we're going to be talking about circles, this circle first, and then this ellipse, then this parabola, and the hyperbola. So before we see off, guys, just make sure that you visit this website. You can even ask me question at perfect-scores.com/forum. Over there you'll be able to ask me questions, and facebook.com/perfectscores. Give us your valuable like, and don't forget to give me your valuable feedback. at perfectscourse89@gmail.com. So this would be about the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.